Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to this 451 and Sumo Logic analyst webinar today, titled Moving Faster Together, Removing Inefficiencies by Securing Modern Architectures. I'd like to introduce your speakers and moderators. My name is Colin Fernandez, and I'm the EMEA Product Marketing Director at Sumo Logic.
And I'm Chiji, and oh, sorry, Fernando, you go first.
No, I'm sorry. So Fernando Montenegro, I'm a principal analyst at 451 Research. We're now a part of S&P Global Market Intelligence, and I cover a lot of cloud security topics. I'm looking forward to talking to you all today.
And I'm Ian Chiji. I'm the GM and VP of EMEA for Sumo Logic.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Fernando, for the collaboration and the great work and the delivery today. Before I hand over to Fernando, I'd like to talk about a few housekeeping items today. If you have a question, please pose your question to the Q&A box, and we'll pick it up at the end of the webinar. We have some time at the end of the webinar. And if not, we'll definitely contact you with our responses if we don't get through all the questions. The slides will be presented to you with a PDF copy of the presentation located on the resource link for download. And finally, this will be an on-demand version of this webinar available for you as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Fernando to kick this webinar off. Fernando?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you, Ian. So hello, everyone. We are going to talk today about the impact of digital transformation, cloud, and more on security, and then tie this into a broader conversation about how we can make things work better together. Brief agenda we're going to follow. We've gone through introductions. I want to talk a little bit about digital architectures, and of course, we have to address how is COVID affecting things. Then we'll go on to different topics around cloud transformation, adoption, security, and then finally some conclusions on how we can move forward as organizations. Well, first of all, I just want to position our methodology on how we do things here at 451. The basis of what we are presenting is going to come from two major pillars. One of them is the independent research that we do in terms of briefings and inquiries with different stakeholders, vendors and executives and service providers and many others, right? And then the other side is that we run a very rigorous and continuous survey panel where we ask practitioners about their practices around different topics on a regular basis. So we may ask about budgets, then the next quarter we'll ask about workloads and so on. For this particular survey, we've used data both from the regular survey program that we run, as well as additional surveys that we have asked around the topics of DevOps and the topic of the impact of coronavirus. So without further ado, let's first take a look at what we mean in the context of digital architectures and the impact of COVID-19. This is the picture that we normally talk about. I mean, traditionally, before all this happened, the view that we originally had about network security and for an organization was around most users are on premises. There's a subset of users that are coming in through VPN. They would come in through a common scenario, and then you would access both traditional resources within the enterprise, the data center, and one or two SaaS applications. That was what we imagined to be the original, the way that things worked on the day-to-day. That's not quite accurate. The reality before COVID was actually something more like this, just as a starter, right? We had the notion that those people were still coming in, but instead of using just one or two cloud services, they started using a lot more. So the point here being that reality was already changing on us a little bit before COVID affected us. So what is happening now what's happening now that COVID has this is the reality that we have, where there has been a significant shift in how the organization is looking at the onslaught of remote work. I've seen that. So we like to use base a lot of our conversations on data, and some of the data we've seen indicated that whereas before COVID we might have been dealing with a workforce that was maybe, let's say, being generous, 5 to 10% of the workforce was coming in remotely. We now have seen numbers upwards of 60, 70, 80%, depending on the type of organization that's being that's responding. And in some of these cases, there has been significant change in just what visibility the organization has. There has been significant change in the traffic patterns that are involved. So I think that this is one of the first areas where we have seen some change in relation to COVID. And when we were preparing the session, we were having conversations with Ian and Colin. They made some very interesting points about how they are seeing this impact their perspective on users. Ian or Colin, do you want to take a stab?
Yeah, thanks, Fernando. I'd like to open that question to Ian, actually. And so, Ian, maybe you can share what Sumo as a business is seeing today.
Yeah, absolutely, Colin. First of all, from our perspective in these COVID times, we're certainly all navigating uncharted waters. Clearly, the priority is health and safety, and I hope you, everybody listening, and your families are faring well and managing to stay safe in these uncertain times. From a Sumo perspective, we are, of course, all working from home. That's the law here in the UK now, work from home if you can. But technically, we were geared up for that anyway, being a HQ-based company in Silicon Valley with remote workers out across the globe. For us, though, it's the human interaction that's really missed, as it is for a lot of organizations. And it's the impact of that really is yet to be quantified from a personal level, but also from the business level. What is that impact on those not being able to do those face-to-face meetings? The challenge, though, that we face, like many businesses, is that there's now many of us, most of us, all working from home. So the surface area of attack, as Fernando's alluded to in this slide, has now got wider. It's not just about more people out there and gearing up technically on the VPNs, but what are those people doing, and where are they doing it, and how are they doing it? And I think that's the challenge that we all need to be cognizant of, not necessarily from an attack inbound or nefarious activity, but just leaving your laptop in a coffee shop, for example. So I think that's the challenge that we all need to be aware of as well.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, and Ian, I think that I agree with you completely. One other thing I want to call out is that that's the point of all those SaaS slides, those SaaS clouds there before. Even before COVID, like we were already moving towards an environment where there is a lot going on in parallel, and the organizations are trying to just understand exactly what it is that they can, how are they going to keep track of what's going on. And I'm kind of, I'm alluding to this because that's going to be a kind of a constant thing throughout this this talk, is this notion of, hey, there's a lot going on, and security teams are trying to keep up with that. Okay, so I'm kind of stealing my own thunder, kind of thing. But one of the things I wanted to talk about in the context of COVID is, yes, we are trying to we're trying to quantify things, and one of the things we've done, I mentioned that we used some survey data from COVID-specific surveys, and we asked back in March, and then we asked people again in June. We're expected to have another one not too distant future. And the context here is we asked people what were they expecting in terms of impact and strain on resources and when this outbreak started. And when it first started, 43% of people indicated that they weren't expecting much. By June, that fell down to 31%. And I think that as we watch the news coming from pretty much all over the world, we are seeing that I expect this number to drop even more. So we are absolutely seeing that there is a strain on resources, and that's changing the nature of what we're going to be doing. One of the questions that comes up is, okay, are we going back to what was before? And that's so we ask that question as well. What do you expect is going to happen? Do you expect these kind of changes are going to be here for a long time? Do you expect these changes are going to revert? And I always like to call out the difference between numbers, and these are the two numbers that I think are relevant. Right. So back in March, when we asked, and one thing I should have mentioned about the surveys early on, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned it earlier, is that usually sample sizes are pretty significant, and they are representative of the broader population. Sometimes there's a little bit of a slant, towards North American numbers, but unless I mention otherwise, they kind of hold in Europe and North America. And sometimes we have slightly smaller samples for Asia, but the numbers pretty much hold, right? And the things that I wanted to mention here is that this significant number of organizations who are indicating that they expect some of these changes to be much longer term. And I think that as this disease wears on, as this pandemic wears on, I think we are coming to that realization that that changes are going to be for the longer term, necessitating a change to how we do technology, how we do security. So one of the things that we ask is what has changed in your IT infrastructure based on this? And I want to call out the chart's a little bit big, but I want to call out that security tools and practices, updates to security, has been one of the areas that has benefited or that has been accelerated the most based on the current pandemic. And from my interpretation, if you factor in whether there's been no impact to security or positive impact to security initiatives, it actually comes out as the top area that organizations have considered. And with that in mind, Ian or Colin, have you seen similar behavior, similar trends from your purview?
Yes, we have, but something that I'd like to do again is just ask Ian, is how do these align to organizational initiatives that we see today?
Yeah, they absolutely do align. What I find interesting about this and what we see with our customers is that it's no longer about moving to the cloud, and you can see it there, cloud migration workloads further down, about in the middle of that slide. It's no longer about moving to the cloud, but now, from our customers' perspective, it's about how to run the business in the cloud, how to leverage the cloud once you're there. So the focus is now on providing that digital delivery of the customer experience, whilst at the same time, though, adopting those new information security tools and practices that are now applicable to this new world of running a business in the cloud. Also, from this slide, and we see with our customers, automation is absolutely playing a key role due to the sheer volumes of data being generated and analyzed. This is now no longer a human scale problem, but has become a machine readable challenge, and we can benefit and take benefit of the elasticity of the cloud, as we all know. So from our perspective, what we see is that in the cloud now, our customers can move away from just focusing on IT and concentrate more on offering product, services, and the customer experience for their business.
Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. So with this kind of aggregation of trends, if you will, I want to shift the conversation a little bit. So we now know that, yes, we are being affected by this, but longer, and we are expecting changes longer term. So what does that, so if we go back to, so how we are going to continue with our digital transformation journeys, we are going, and as security use cases pop up, and we have to be supporting them. So I want to switch the conversation away from COVID for a bit and talk about digital transformation and cloud transformation and more. So I want to bring your attention to this chart. This chart is, we asked general IT practitioners, right? And whenever it is general IT versus security, I'll call it out. This is general IT practitioners. We asked them in 2019 and in 2020 about how do they go about negotiating that digital transformation inside their organization, right? One of the things I like to highlight is that as an analyst, one of my contributions is to show you what's happening in other organizations so that you may position yourself within your own organization. Are we ahead? Are we behind? What can we expect that's going to happen? What's different? So one of the things we asked is, are you having conversations? Are more people having an influence on your digital transformation strategy? And the number of people who indicated that this was not changing has dropped. And as you can see from the highlights here, they are consistently indicating that more people are involved, right? And I think that this is one of the most important things. As it might sound obvious in some respect, but it's really important to understand that we're now dealing, not only there's digital transformation happening faster, but it's also happening involving more people, which involves more coordination costs, if you will. So this is a point on we're involving more people. One other question that we always get is, okay, do people actually care about security? And I think that the combination of external regulations that we've seen with Europe driving the world's discussion on this, with the general concern about how impactful technology is in modern society, I'm happy to see that the numbers indicate that senior IT leadership is well aware of the need to protect corporate and customer data and puts that as a top-level business concern. What this means is that it's no longer the case of necessarily fighting for resources. It's more the case of how do you collaborate inside your organization in an effective way. So this is on digital transformation. When we talk about, so let's talk about cloud for a little bit. Is cloud and digital the same thing? Well, not quite. How do we where does modernization happen? Right? What's happening? Cloud transformation is absolutely a part of it. Well, here we asked practitioners around how are you modernizing your environment? What it is that you're doing? And some people, and the options that you can see on the screen include, we're going to modernize on premises, right? We're going to use new techniques. We're going to use containers. We're going to use Kubernetes, microservices, what have you, but we're going to do it on premises. Some of us say, no, listen, we're going to do that, but we're going to move to cloud. And some people indicate, no, we're just going to take the workloads and put them to cloud because that's all that we want right now. A couple of things to call out. First of all, is that this number has that the number of people between 2019 and 2020 indicating that they're only doing lift and shift has diminished, right? So only 10% of people indicate that as a use case, and consistently they are doing the other two, right? So there's a large proportion of people who are saying, no, we want the benefits of cloud, the agility and so on, but we want that on premises, right? And then you have a proportion of people as well who say, no, we are going to do that while we're going to the cloud. What this point, the key point I want to make here is that the reality means that this is a different, it's a much more distributed environment. It's a much more heterogeneous environment. One other factor that I wanted to call out is we asked practitioners, okay, so if you're going to keep your workloads on premises, why are you keeping them on premises? And the point here is that, and we can see the gray bars, people indicate that, hey, ensuring data and system security is the main reason we're keeping things on premises. And that's fine. But it's really interesting when you take that data apart into who is responding, what kind of rationale for keeping things on premises. And we see a significant difference in many categories between general IT practitioners and senior leadership. And I think that this opens up a gap that we have to close in our discourse around how we secure and how we choose workload placement. So you can see here, for example, performance and uptime are critical for senior managers, right? They visualize that as a key reason for keeping things on premises. So I think that, Ian, we were talking about this earlier, this points to how are we helping people, how are you seeing the need for organizations to balance these needs kind of thing?
So I think, yeah exactly. Sorry, go on, Ian.
I was going to say absolutely. Just going to comment on Fernando's comment there about the optimization and keeping the applications running and the trade-off between modernization and security. What I find interesting about this is that senior managers find that optimizing the applications and performance is top of mind. Which again is about the customer experience, right? Keeping those applications running means you've got happy customers leads to revenue hopefully, and that is good for the business. So keeping these systems running, performance monitoring, diagnosing, troubleshooting these applications, keeping the critical applications running 24/7 is about customer experience, and this is what the industry is now calling observability, watching all of those applications and making sure that they're all up and running. However, what's also interesting is that top of mind for IT engineering managers is security. So from our perspective, I mean, this validates what we, again, see with our customers. Observability and security must absolutely go hand in hand. You can't consider one without the other and must look at them both holistically.
Perfect. Thank you. No, it's something like I'm an old school security practitioner. I remember when we started, like how I still see how a lot of synergy between security and operations when it comes to, like I said, observability. So this is interesting. So we know that there's a role for cloud. We know that there's a role for on-premises. What does that adoption kind of look like moving forward? And here I am again with data. This one of the things we're talking about is as we're preparing this call, how sometimes I like to make jokes, and so the future looks cloudy is my attempt at humor on the title, so I apologize for that. But the way to interpret this data here, it's fascinating. We ask people, again, security general practitioners, where are we asked them in 2020, so this was early 2020, we asked them, where does the majority of your workloads reside now, right? And in what you see in this number here, 38% indicate that the majority of their workload is traditional on-premises IT. And then we asked them now in 2020, where do you expect that number to be 2 years in the future? Where do you expect the majority of your workloads to reside in the future? Right? So it's like an expectation, a statement from customers, where do they expect things to reside? And the really interesting thing here is that you can see that the answer drops to 15%. I don't want to say that it's 15% of workloads are on premises. That's not that. It's that only 15% of respondents indicated that the majority of their workloads are going to reside on premises traditional infrastructure, right? And I think that this points to an interesting scenario where you can see that there's a significant adoption of SaaS services. There's significant adoption of IaaS, and other types of delivery, and private cloud, both hosted and on premises. This goes along with the data that we showed earlier around people modernizing in different ways. I just to make sure that one thing I want to call out is that this is going to vary by use case. This is more generic. So I have a couple of slides on use cases. The first, and so the way to interpret this is just as to contrast with the data that I just showed you. Here we asked about ERPs, right? And this is part of a much larger study talking different use cases. I just wanted to pick up on ERP. For ERP systems, right now, and I picked on one vendor just because of sample size. It didn't. There's no endorsements or anything. Just as an example. So in one case, right now, 65% of respondents indicated that their ERP systems are hosted on-premises IT infrastructure, traditional IT, right? Whereas but only 34% expect that to be so in 2 years from now. Where is that going? Well, there's a big chunk that's going over to public cloud as IaaS, right? In this case, hey, we're going to spin up virtual machines ourselves. We are going to take those virtual machines and then run them just as a back-end data center kind of thing. This is ERP, just as an example. Here's another one. Here we ask about something completely different. We ask about DevOps. This was from our DevOps survey, right? Relatively large sample size. And again, there's the number of people who indicate in 2020 that they are doing DevOps on an on-premise non-cloud infrastructure was 20%, but it dropped significantly down to 6% in 2 years. Where does that go? Well, it goes to mostly an as-a-service type of model, right? Whether the platform as a service, software as a service, and so on. So, but the reality here, the thing I wanted to call out here specifically is that when we're talking about DevOps, it's a completely different use case than ERP, but we're seeing that same direction, right? There's one other data point about DevOps that really surprised me, and if I could suggest, if I was teaching a class and say, pay attention to this one point, I think that this is a very impactful slide when you think about it. What we asked here from our DevOps survey was, how are your DevOps processes being managed in your organization? 47% of people indicate that, yes, IT is centrally managing their DevOps processes. But a whopping 49% indicated that the processes are managed within the business units, and the organization is aware of them, which is great. So altogether, 96%. But there is less visibility from the central IT practitioners. I think that this is a fundamental problem for security moving forward, because you are now not necessarily having visibility into what other people are doing to the level of detail that you would normally have had before. So I think that this is going to point, we'll talk about security needs in a few slides. This points about, again, the fact that you are now interacting with many more people, and sometimes you may not have as much visibility as you normally would have had. The other thing about cloud I wanted to point out is that are we all going multi-cloud? Do we have a presence in multiple environments? And it should be as no surprise that the top spots go to the providers that larger hyperscale providers, Amazon, Microsoft Azure, and Google. The thing that's interesting here is that even though 76% of people and 72% of people indicate they use AWS, the proportion who indicate that they are their primary is actually much lower, right? One data point I'm not showing on the slides, but I'll talk about it verbally, is that on a recent survey we did, we asked how many cloud providers do you actually have? And I believe the number was 78% of respondents indicated they have 2 or more cloud providers, right? And then on their top provider, they might have a significant proportion of their workloads there, but they do have a distinct number of providers, right? And Colin or Ian, does this match what you were seeing in terms of the infrastructure and managing for your customers?
Well, Fernando, firstly, thanks for adding this slide. I'll take this one. So definitely. So multi-cloud is real. We've been on a number of webinars and, meetings to discuss how our customers are approaching their transformation. The important thing here is that there are two sides to the coin. One is multi-cloud offering that flexibility and choice, but there's a dark side, and I think that relates to vendor lock-in, fear of change. I don't know if you've heard this analogy about the murmuration of birds, especially starlings, where they just follow each other. That can, really cause a bottleneck, or it stifles innovation, and it affects customer experience in a big way. So it's important to understand how, and some of the points that both of you have brought across today is the importance of securing, observability, and really integrating and making sure that security is part of that, that solution across multi-clouds, across all that data that they generate, and lastly, the boundaries and new perimeters that we have to face with new applications and infrastructure. So yeah, very important, very appropriate.
Yeah, no, I think that it speaks to this changing nature. Like we can talk about the fact that, I'll go back to that DevOps slide, right? This work, there's not only a dimension of more different type of workloads in different technology environments, but you are dealing with different people. And that is, I think that's a key factor. So again, stealing my thunder, let's talk a little bit about what that has caused in terms of security impact, right, for security practitioners. So now so switching gears a little bit, we now ask security practitioners primarily. And one of the questions we asked them not too long ago was, okay, where is your, what kind of skill sets is your organization struggling with that you think that you have to cover? And as you see here, cloud platform expertise is listed as the top one, right? And I just saw preliminary numbers for this was late 2019. For 2020, the numbers are I just saw preliminary ones. They're very similar, right? Cloud platform is still number one. And this is a problem, right? Because you now have a scenario where security teams are trying to interact with different stakeholders, and they don't. They're trying to understand what's happening. Just saying that there is a lot going on, and teams have to focus on where their efforts go, and this is a significant problem. So that's on the skills gap for security. With that in mind, then, what happens? What are they concerned about? Right. So, okay, we have to secure cloud environments that all these teams are now doing. What kind of concerns are they having? And I really like this slide because it captures the essence of the problem really well. Security practitioners reported that the top three issues they have is, first of all, loss of control of sensitive data, which kind of makes sense in the context of you're trying to understand just where the data that you care about is. Then auditability, which is other people are making security configurations and security choices in environments I don't have control over, that sometimes I may have difficulty even understanding what they're doing. So how am I going to audit to make sure that they're doing the right way? And then the third one is, okay, now that I've done this, how can I concisely and efficiently take that information and report that back up to people that are asking me, right? So how do I report on compliance of my environment, of my cloud environment? And this is where sometimes people might say, oh no, I'll just rely on my cloud provider to tell me that. I mean, they are compliant, right? And which leads me to a conversation about the shared responsibility model, right? This is a conceptual slide we put together just to highlight the fact that the shared responsibility model that we talk about is sometimes the lines are not clearly drawn, and we try to clear them up a little bit here. As you've seen variations of this chart, the things on the bottom are always your provider responsibility, right? There's a little bit of variation on the top, on the middle about what kind of service you're contracting. So is the security of an application something that's really mine, or is it the provider? That's fine. But the top part is absolutely critical, right? The top part is what it is that you are, it's always your responsibility. And one of the things that that we like to call out here is that there's always overall security responsibility is always yours, right? There is always sorry about that. There's identity and access management is always yours. Data governance is always yours, and security monitoring and response is always yours, right? So I think that this points to organizations looking at, okay, how are we going to do this, right? And I know that Colin and Ian, we were chatting about this at points as well.
Well, we've been debating this and discussing this with Ian and the team, and it's a hot topic. So thanks for bringing this forward. So, my last question to, I think, Ian is, it's a hot topic in the cloud, but why is it so important to our prospects, our customers, our partners, and mostly to Sumo Logic itself? So, Ian?
Yeah, so from our perspective, as a true SaaS provider that is born in the cloud, we've seen the evolution of the shared responsibility model. And Sumo was founded in 2010, right at the start of the cloud wave. And initially, our customers, our prospects were fearful of placing data in the cloud. So they naturally asked us to take the responsibility for the data. However, we don't actually own the data as a SaaS provider. It resides in our cloud provider. So arguably, it should be them that takes that responsibility. 10 years later, that thinking has now evolved, and as the cloud has become more understood, I mean, ultimately, it is the customer's data, as Fernando points out, that they own it, and they should be responsible for it. That's not to say, though, that the SaaS provider, the SaaS vendor, and the cloud provider don't have a part to play in security in a shared responsibility model. And if I give a real-life analogy to that, if I may, if you think about your car as a container, to use a modern-day IT reference, think of your car as a container, and you go and park your car in a car park, think of car park as infrastructure, then when you leave your car, your container in the car park, the infrastructure, then you are responsible for your belongings, your data that is in that container. Right? When you leave your belongings in that car, you're responsible for that. So ultimately, it is, we believe, as Fernando's pointed out, the responsibility of the customer to own that and be responsible for that data.
Great analogy. Thank you.
Yeah, and we were having great fun with analogies when we're prepping for that. I love this one. Thank you so much, Ian. Now, one thing I wanted to call out is, okay, how are we addressing this? And I'll move quickly. One of the things we asked organizations is, how are you going to secure? Okay, with all of this in mind, how are you planning to secure this kind of environment? And while there is significant uptick on the security functionality from your cloud provider, right? The significant number of customers indicated that they are going to use third-party security services on top of whatever your provider is offering. And in further conversations I had with people, the greatest, the common denominator about all this is that people are looking to secure cloud as part of their existing security response processes, as part of their existing operational model, not as something different. So they want to be able to have a consistent view whether something is on cloud, whether something is on premises, which when you consider what we've shown you earlier about just how distributed the workloads are actually going to be, that makes absolute, total, and complete sense. With that in mind, one final data slide I have to share with you is that when this was back in 2019, so late 2019, 2020 planning, so before the pandemic, we asked security people, how are you planning to do this? And for 2020, and the majority indicated they are looking more into how are they thinking about their analytics? How are they thinking about their visualization into other environments, which again makes perfect sense when you consider that as the work is more distributed, your role as a security team becomes advisory in some cases, and we'll get to that in a bit, but it also becomes, let's verify, let's observe, and like what's the phrase, trust but verify. So with that in mind, I'll pass it over to Ian. I think we want to position some of what they are bringing to talk to us about today. Ian?
Thanks, Fernando. Thank you. I'm here. Yeah. I just wanted to share some of the observations that we're seeing, and actually from this presentation as well, we've talked about the cloud is really about customer experience and security. And for us, customer experience, I talk about customer, I mentioned it a couple of times, customer experience. Customers are at the heart of our business that drive ultimately, dollars and pounds or euros into our business. But that experience is underpinned by the applications that are run, and that is underpinned by the modern day architectures that we're now running in the cloud. And so moving to the cloud really fundamentally is about that customer experience, and of course then being secure at the same time. Also, Fernando mentioned earlier on in the presentation, he was an old school security analyst, and the synergies between security and ops, and we've certainly seen that. The critical applications that we run are the touch points for our customers into our business. So we need to ensure that these applications are performing. That's the operations piece, right? Application performance monitoring, logging and monitoring. The data that they produce and the data that we collect and that we analyze, we need to keep that secure. So if I may use another analogy, you've heard the saying, the eyes are the windows into our soul. Well, the applications are the windows into our business for our customers. And the data is the soul of our business. So we need to keep it healthy and we need to keep it safe. However, the promise of the single pane of glass to monitor, troubleshoot and secure these applications in order to provide that customer experience is actually not there. The truth is that performance monitoring and security monitoring have been siloed. Although the synergies, they've traditionally been siloed. So that means you might have blind spots in the health and safety of your business. You may also be paying a double tax for ingesting the same information into these systems. For example, you require the same log in your application performance monitoring tool that you require in your security monitoring tool. You pull that data in, it splits potentially into two different areas, and you end up paying twice for that same piece of information, the same data that you ingest. So as we continue to see security move closer into the application development lifecycle, not just in the perimeter, still is at the perimeter clearly, but as we move into more DevOps and DevSecOps, security is now moving closer into development. This is now creating overlaps in the observability solutions, but there is a need for them to converge further with the security solutions that are available. The challenge is the best of breed ethos still prevails, and we still have the single glass of pane from running separate solutions. So we believe that a new security and analytics service is required, one that mirrors the security, operational and economic models of cloud computing and modern day architectures. We call this the continuous intelligence. So what is continuous intelligence? Continuous intelligence delivers real-time insights as a service across multiple use cases in one single cloud-native platform. What that means is that you only need to bring this data in once, and the solution can provide you the operational, security, and business insights that you need, and without the data tax. Now, we don't have much time to go into this today, continuous intelligence, but happy to have further conversations with us, so please feel free to reach out if you'd like to learn more about continuous intelligence. And I do believe there is a shameless plug later on in the presentation about our upcoming user conference as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ian. So I want to bring us to some conclusions that we've seen and some recommendations in terms of broad things that we've observed that may work for some organizations. Of course, you have to adjust it to your own environment. Right? A couple of things that we've observed, right, is that securing these modern architectures is primarily a collaborative effort, right? There has to be long-term collaboration between the stakeholders. And here I like to call out there's both a tactical and a strategic element to this conversation. On the strategic side, if you will, it can't just be engineers talking to each other, hey, let's collaborate. There has to be support from the rest of the organization in terms of how do you reassign risk? right? Who owns the risk for a particular application? Who's responsible for owning the risk versus who's responsible for reporting on the risk, and so on, just as an example, right? We have to recognize the distributed nature of the work, right? And we have to recognize that things are moving that much faster, right? As we saw with the COVID data, this may point us towards making newer choices in our technology stack. The other set of conclusions is that we see security teams supporting the broader development and the broader deployment of functionality I want to call it kind of like a support function, right? Your role in this distributed world is to enable those teams to do things their way securely. It's not your job to do security for them. They are the ones doing it. A couple of areas to call out is I think it's really important to be able to understand just what work is coming down the line. Right? Too many times security teams have said, hey, listen, this was just sprung on us. We didn't see it at all. Right? And then a couple of practices I think really help. I mean, I really like threat modeling with teams as an example of how to convey security knowledge and being there to support them in an instant response kind of functionality. Moving forward, to the extent that we can help, embed the knowledge that the organization itself has deployed within its own, in a way that's more scalable. Perhaps you're creating compliance functionality within the pipeline. Perhaps you're adding shared libraries for things like authentication and monitoring. Perhaps you're considering those observability and security tie-in use cases, as Ian mentioned. Now, Colin, I think that you wanted to talk to us about the upcoming event.
Yes, I do. So it's my last slide, but I think Ian just pointed out to our yearly user conference. It's T-minus 1 week. We're expecting, over 4,000 customers, partners, and I just wanted to share the event with our audience and with yourself. So it's a 2-day event, but the message here is that it's a community. We're bringing together a virtual platform that allows you to connect, interact, learn, and really, pick up on the points and the challenges that we covered today, and actually hear from, great customers like Sega and others, Snoop, and many, many more across the globe. So do register, come and join us, and we look forward to hosting you at that point. I'd like to, end this now, with the questions session, and pick up on some of the questions in the box. So I'm just going to point them at both of you. So I'll take the first question for Fernando. So working, I think many people are learning how to work with cloud teams. We talked about DevOps, DevSecOps, but the thing, but we do need to understand what to do in these times of change. So can you give us some ideas there, Fernando?
So thank you. Thank you for the question. I think that we, one of the biggest things we have to understand is that, and I alluded to earlier, there is both a tactical and a strategic element to further collaboration between security and other cloud engineering, DevOps, developers, operations teams. That has to happen both at the tactical level between the organization themselves. How do I insert my product or my security functionality into your pipeline? What format am I sharing something with you or not, and so on? How do you log into my system to check the status of compliance, whatever. But there's also a strategic dimension. And by that, I mean there has to be collaboration between organizations, between departments at a higher level. There has to be, if there is no collaboration, then this means that my individual metrics, right, if they're not being affected by security, right? If I'm not being charged, if I'm not being tasked and given the resources to do security the right way, I'm sorry, I have my deliverables to work on. I'm going to do the best I can, but I can only do so much in a day. So I think that the biggest thing I would call in is if you're having trouble getting that collaboration going, move it up the food chain, if you will, move it up the organization and have that as a broader collaboration between departments would be my suggestion.
Thank you. I'm going to point this at Ian. Small organizations, large organizations, Ian. Data affects everybody, but what do you see as the top business drivers that organizations need to address, with their data? And what are, just the top three, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, the top three that I would see, I'll use three words: agility, security, and cost. And let me come back to those. And I would also put them in that order as well. So agility is a word that's used a lot. But pick that apart. Agility is about going fast. It's about developing code fast, right? And the reason we develop code fast with DevOps is because we want to get ahead of our competition. We want to get our applications out, our products out quicker than the competition so that we can attract the customers, so that we can ultimately, secure the business and secure the dollars. Now, Fernando touched on this as well in terms of the old school where security were building the fences on the perimeter to keep everybody out. That's now moved into the development life cycle. So there needs to be that collaboration. So security is moving into that DevOps pipeline, into the DevOps pipelines. The reason I put that second is because clearly, if there is no IPR or intellectual property, then there's nothing to secure, right? So it's all about going fast, and it's all about business. And then ultimately, people think, I think this is a term that's used a lot, the moving to the cloud is about saving money. It isn't. I don't think it is. Moving to the cloud gives you that elasticity in the infrastructure that allows you then to be agile, and of course then you can be secure. So, and I think that's the same across the small business or even to the large business. So agility, security, and cost is really the three that wrap around the data.
Fantastic, Ian. Thank you so much for that. And lastly, I think you answered it, but I'd like to hear Fernando is there any difference between larger and smaller organizations from your perspective, Fernando, in the research that you've done?
Oh, yes. Favorite topic of mine. The data that I showed you was high-level data across multiple organizations, right? So on aggregate, we do see differences between smaller and larger, and we do see differences between newer firms and older firms. But in general, I would say that if I was going to paint a brush, a high-level segmentation between them, is that we definitely see larger firms spending more effort in terms of things that are related to coordination, right? I keep going back to this problem of coordination between teams, the distributed nature of work, and so on. So, for example, when we ask about, I've shown you that data that security analytics is like 21% of respondents indicated analytics as a key area, right? That's the aggregate number. The number for larger companies is actually 27%, right? Where the numbers for smaller companies, I believe it's 17, right? So that's just an example. I have other data on different things. On DevOps, for example, when we ask about security tools for DevOps, larger firms will typically prioritize vulnerability assessment tools, whereas smaller firms will prioritize software composition analysis. Right. So I think that what we're seeing, the key difference between them is that the larger organization is spending more effort, more time, more resources in that coordination game. And so as an organization, the better you can get at that coordination game, I think the best outcomes you'll have. You don't have to do, it's the realization that you don't have to do everything yourself as a security team. You are working with others. I think that's my biggest thing.
Super. Thank you. So at this time, I just want to personally thank our audience, for everybody who registered and attended. A heartfelt thank you to Ian and Fernando for all the work and the contributions. And from myself, Colin Fernandez, thank you for attending this session. And thank you to 451 for this event. Thank you.
Thank you all. This has been a tremendous pleasure.
Thank you.